Hello, the world of tomorrow. This is Jeremy, and I'm going to be reading the introduction of The Power of Now. So listen up and enjoy. The origin of this book. I have little use for the past and rarely think about it. However, I would briefly like to tell you how I came to be a spiritual teacher and how this book came into existence. Until my 13th year, I lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety, interspersed with periods of Okay, I'm going to have to get this down. Until my 13th year, I lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety, interspersed with periods of suicidal depression. It feels now as if I am talking about some past lifetime or somebody else's life. One night, long after my 29th birthday, I woke up in the early hours with a feeling of absolute dread. I had woken up with such a feeling many times before, but this time, it was more intense than it has ever been. The silence of the night, the vague outlines of the future, or the vague outlines of the furniture in the dark room, the distant noise of a passing train. Everything felt so alien, so hostile, and so utterly meaningless that it created in my deep loathing of the world. Ooh. The most loathsome thing of all, however, was my own existence. What was the point in continuing to live with this burden of misery? Why carry on with this continuous struggle? I could feel that a deep longing for annihilation, for non-existence, was now becoming much stronger than the instinct desire to continue to live. I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly I became aware of what a particular thought it was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me. The I and the self that I cannot live with. Maybe, I thought, only one of them is real. I was so stunned by the strange realization that my mind stopped. I was fully conscious, but there was no more thoughts. Then I felt drawn into what seemed like a vortex of energy. It was a slow movement at first, and then accelerated. I was gripping to an intense fear, and my body started to shake. I heard the words, "resist nothing," as it spoke inside me, or as if spoken inside my chest. I could feel myself being sucked into the void. It felt as if the void was inside myself rather than outside. Suddenly, there was no more fear, and I let myself fall into the void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. I was awakened by the chirping of a bird outside the window. I had never heard such a sound before. My eyes were still closed, and I saw the image of a precise diamond. Yes, if a diamond could make a sound, this is what it would be like. I opened my eyes. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains. Without any thought, I know that there is infinitely more to light than we realize. The soft luminescing filtering through the curtains was love itself. Tears came into my eyes. I got up and walked around the room. I recognized the room, and yet I knew that I had never truly seen it before. As if my eyes were open. I added that, but whatever. Everything was fresh and pristine, as if it had just come into existence. I picked up things, a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and aliveness of it all. That day, I walked around the city in utter amazement at the miracle of life on earth, as if I had just been born into this world. For the next 5 months, I lived in a state of interrupted deep peace and bliss. After that, it diminished somewhat in intensity, or perhaps it just seemed to because it became my natural state. I could still function in the world, although I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I already did. Oh, no, wait, let me do that again. I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I already had. Very deep. I know, of course, that something profoundly significant had happened to me, but I didn't realize it. I didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years later, after I had read spiritual text and spent time with spiritual teachers, that I realized that what everybody was looking for had already happened to me. I understood that the intense pressure of suffering that night must have forced my consciousness to withdraw from its identification with the unhappy and deeply fearful self, which is ultimately a fiction of the mind. This withdrawal must have been so complete that it was false. Suffering self immediately collapsed, as he said, the vortex, right? Just as if a plug had been pulled of an inflatable toy. What was left then was my true nature as the ever-present I am. I am smelling like a rose somebody gave me. No, I don't think so. Consciousness is its pure state prior to identification with form. Consciousness is in its pure state prior to identification of form. With meh. Later, I also learned to go into the inner timeless and deathless realm that I had originally perceived as a void and remained fully conscious. I dwelt in states of such undescribable bliss and sacredness that even the original experience I had just described pales in comparison. A time came when, for a while, I was left with nothing on the physical plane. I had no relationships, no jobs, no home, no socially defined identity. I spent almost 2 years sitting on park benches in a state of almost unprecedented joy. He didn't say that, but I thought it fit. But even the most beautiful experiences come and go. But even the most beautiful experiences come and go. More fundamental, perhaps, than any experience in the undercurrent of peace that has never left me since then. Oh, I'm going to have to do that over again. That was horrible. More fundamental, perhaps, than any experience in the undercurrent of peace that has never left me since then. Sometimes it is very strong, almost palpable. That word itself is really hard because it's not as palatable as it needs to be. And sometimes it is very strong, and others can feel it too. At other times, it is somewhere in the background, like a distant melody. Like you almost hear it. It's fluttering. Later, people would occasionally come up to me and say, I want what you have. Can you give it to me or show me how to get it? And I would say, you have it already, child. No, not child, but that's kind of what I'm getting at from that. You have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. So shut up! Shut that mind up! That answer later grew into this book that you were holding in your hands. I'm holding your hands. You're not, but you get the gist. Before I knew it, I had an external identity again, and I had become a spiritual teacher. Next time, I'll read the rest of the chapter. Introduction.